Thank you. Hi for having me. My name is Brandi Morin. I am Cree, Iroquois, and French. I'm from Treaty 6 territories in so-called Alberta, and I am a journalist and filmmaker as well as a mother. I specialize in telling Indigenous stories around Indigenous rights, Indigenous sovereignty, residential school survivors, the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls genocide, and have covered many frontline conflicts with Indigenous people standing to protect their territories from industrial projects. Mm-hmm. And recently produced and directed, along with my colleague Geordie Day, Killer Water, which is what we're here to discuss. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, Brandi. Thank you for your work. Thank you for this introduction. We should say you've been too humble and not reminded people that you've won many, many awards and distinctions, recognitions for the work that you do, which we'll talk about again. But I find that you really managed to strike the balance between accurate and yet deeply personal and impactful, and doesn't feel at all like you're just trying to stay away and do some sort of reporting that would be removed from the people you are engaging with. And that's really admirable and really high quality journalism. So really honored to be in conversation with you today.
Hi. Thank you. It's an honor to meet with you, and especially considering that you are there in Dubai at COP28. So.
Yes, that's right. That's a good introduction for the disclaimer for folks. It is late where I am. I'm in Dubai, in the UAE for COP28. COP, for folks who might not be following so closely, UN summits is the annual climate UN summit. Perhaps we'll touch on it, but of course, a lot of the topics we're talking about here, whether it's Indigenous rights or fossil fuels and fossil fuel phase out, are live conversations that we're having at COP. And so for folks to know who is speaking, my name is Aliénor, or Ali Rougeau. I'm a climate and energy program manager at Environmental Defense. And Environmental Defense is an advocacy organization. We do work with communities, with individuals, with any group that will work with us to advance policies that will achieve greater environmental protection and a safe climate for us all to live in. So programs from, anything from climate to plastics to water are things that we cover and are interested in. But today we are here to talk about the very serious and concerning topic of the tar sands, of their toxic legacy, of their impacts on what is the area we're talking about? What is it like, since you were there so recently?
Yes, so the Alberta tar sands, oil sands is one of the world's largest industrial extractive projects, and it's located in northern Alberta in Cree, Dene, Métis traditional territories, just north of Fort McMurray. And it is where oil is extracted from deposits of bitumen in the sand, and then processed, to feed, the world's hunger for fossil fuels. And in the meantime, a lot of the toxins and pollution from this ongoing project affects not only our world in regards to, the emissions that are released, but the Indigenous communities that are living downstream and surrounding this this project.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, we'll talk about that more, but perhaps many folks across, Canada are aware of how much we export oil, but perhaps don't think about the source. And it's really important for us to shed light on that today. And as we do that, I will give a little shout out to the folks in the comments, Keepers of the Water, who do excellent work in large part on protecting the Athabasca watershed, which is the watershed impacted by the tar sands and tailings. So you were just talking about the tar sands. At Environmental Defense, we've been concerned about the tar sands for many reasons. There's the climate impacts, there's the carbon emissions, but there is also this very real impact on the Indigenous nations that live downstream and the biodiversity that is around it, and all of that is, of course, one ecosystem, but they're not separated. One of the parts of the tar sands beyond the extraction is, of course, these toxic tailings ponds, right? Which Jean Lomcourt, who is the co-chair of Keepers of the Water, and who is a traditional knowledge keeper, has said we shouldn't call them ponds, because when you look at the size, they are immense lakes of sludge. And I wonder if that's something did you see that? How did it feel? How did it look? How was it?
Yes, I've seen toxic tailings ponds for several years since I've been going up to the north, and I've done stories on the community of Fort McKay First Nation, which is literally right in the center and surrounded by the tar sands, and of course have flown over when I'm traveling to Fort Chipewyan. And several years ago, when I was up going to Fort McKay, and they have these tailings ponds along the highway, and they're fenced off with these chain link fences, and I pulled over a couple of times to check them out, and I had my daughter with me at the time, and I believe she was about 15 or 16 at the time, and I was going to take some photos, because in these big lakes of tailings, they have what they call bitumen men, and they're kind of like they're supposed to be like scarecrows to scare the birds from landing there so that they won't die. And they are dressed as men with like hard hats and bright yellow gear, bobbing up in various places out of this pond. And then every few minutes you hear what sounds like bombs going off, because they're cannons that are released to scare the wildlife from that area. And it was so like otherworldly. And I got out and I was taking some photos, and like my whole being was affected. I did like I just felt the destruction that was happening there, and the heaviness and the darkness of it. And I was snapping these photos, and my daughter was in the car, and she's very calm, very level-headed. After a couple of minutes, she was talking out of the car. She said, "Mom, I want to get out of here now. We have to leave now." And like her spirit and her senses and her body were so affected and so disturbed by it. And it was really it impacted me to see my daughter like stressed out like that, and that's our future generations. So that was one of my first encounters with the area, and I'll forever remember it.
Absolutely. And hearing you saying that, and this needs to leave, we have to remember, we have to keep in mind, and throughout this conversation, that neither you nor I live there permanently, and there are nations and communities that live there permanently, and that's, I think, what your documentary Kilowater really starts opening up. I mean, of course, it would take millions of stories to tell all the stories of Fort Chipewyan and the area, but your documentary really gets started. So let's talk about what prompted this documentary. I don't know whether it was a project of yours prior to the Imperial Oil curl spill that happened, whether that was what prompted it. But perhaps let's recap for folks this Imperial Oil incident that happened, and that really brought again the spotlight on tailings and on the tar sands.
Yeah. So it did prompt me wanting to go up to Fort Chipewyan to see how the community was doing after these latest major releases of toxic tailings into the river systems that that drain into the Athabasca River, which is the main river system that leads into Lake Athabasca, where Fort Chipewyan is perched, right on the banks of. And so I have been following these stories for a number of years, but that was what kicked this documentary off. So in February, it was announced that Imperial Oil had a major tailings leak of over 5 million liters of toxic tailings. And then shortly afterward, it was discovered that this another leak at the same Crow mine had been leaking for about 9 months prior. It could have been longer, but this was only made aware of to the Indigenous leadership and other authorities in February. And so there was a long delay, some call it a cover up, between Imperial Oil and the Alberta Energy Regulator, which is tasked with regulating these industries, in notifying these communities of these spills. Now, this was a major incident, and a month later Suncor had another release of multi-millions of tailings ponds. But these these releases and these impacts, although these were major incidences, they've been happening for years. Right. And communities like Fort Chipewyan have been living with the impacts for years. The impacts are devastating, on their water, on their lands, and their animals, and the people. And so we really wanted to, try to, like within a short documentary, give voice to the people on the ground, because we often hear from governments, we often hear from these industries who put out press releases and statements to assure that they are doing everything correctly and that everything is fine and there's nothing to worry about. But it's the Native communities that are actually living on the land, that are actually drinking the water and utilizing the waterways, that their voices get drowned out, that are seeing and experiencing, these changes that are disturbing. So.
No, absolutely. And thank you for that recap. And one of the things that folks might know or might not know, because the tailings they contain the wastewater resulting from oil production. And perhaps when people think of oil production, they might think of what we call conventional oil. But in the tar sands, how it happens, it takes an immense amount of fresh water to separate the bitumen from the sand. And it takes this entire process, which results in a huge amount of wastewater that is now contaminated, laced with residual bitumen, first of all, which of course is toxic for ecosystems. And within that, the heavy metals, the naphthenic acids, all those things that have various effects, from disrupting reproductive systems to, being linked by health professionals and by communities to direct illnesses that they're feeling or things that they're seeing on wildlife. So we're really talking about toxicity here. And as we were saying at the beginning, you approach this as a journalist, as a storyteller, as a journalist. And in this case, this was a killer moment where someone needed to tell the truth, because there had been a cover up for months. And then even when the story broke, as you were saying, there was this overpowering narrative that there is no proven impact, so don't worry. And so I'd like to hear from you on how does your documentary try to address this, there is no proven impact and therefore there must be no impact kind of narrative that industry tried to create, really.
Yeah, so I think we need to look at the industry and the Alberta Energy Regulator, look at their history and look at their actions. They have not been transparent, and they have, delayed, the information regarding these releases. That is very telling in itself. What else is out there? This information has already been out there. It's just not addressed, and it's not very prominent in the news because they get quashed by these other narratives when even governments come alongside to endorse these narratives by industry and regulators, that everything is fine. The thing is, what I discovered when making this documentary is they do a certain amount of testing, but there are lacking in, when these projects are first approved, they do environmental impact assessments, and then they monitor, the environmental impacts, and they do initial predictions on what the impacts might be on human health and Indigenous communities. And after that project's approved, they do not continue to monitor the human health impacts. So there are so many voids. And even when it comes to the types of testing that they're doing, they're only testing at a very novel level. They're not testing for a lot of these chemicals that could be affecting, human and animal life. And so, the communities, the leadership, would like to see the Alberta governments and industry invest in further health studies, further testing, for these contaminants that they aren't looking for, which gives them leeway to say that it's safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so folks who are maybe joining us now are just wondering, okay, I need to hear more. I want to know more. Well, this is really the documentary that we've been talking about, Killer Water, by Brandi Morin, who is with us now. Folks should really, write down the name and make it an action item within the next few days. I mean, the weekend's coming up. Watch it and bring, loved ones, trusted ones with you. I have to say, it was very moving. First of all, it's a moving documentary because you are seeing directly your conversations with people who have been knowing this truth forever, and it feels like it feels deeply unjust that we had to get to such a high-profile incident for all their knowledge to be out there, because these communities, it's not the first time they're opposing this. It's not the first time they're calling out the regulator. They have been saying that truth forever. And so it's very moving to see kind of that truth come out at you. It's moving to see, stories of children not being able to be who they want to be and just be in that water, which we know is so healing and so important. So really recommend to our audience here to watch Killer Water and to bring others along. I'm curious, did you have moments of that documentary that you want to highlight, moments during the filming that perhaps either moved you, surprised you, things that you didn't expect at all going in? Anything you want to share like that?
I was really, really stunned. I mean, I knew about the reported higher rates of cancer and disease and the concerns around that. I have been at fish camps near Fort Chipewyan where I've seen the deformities in fish in a single catch. But it's a community of about 1,200 people. It's not really big. The people live off the land, and everything is connected: the land, the water, the people. It's a circle. And I was actually stunned by the amount of people that are sick or know somebody that's sick in that small of a community. Every single person I spoke to, whether I interviewed them for the film or not, passing by in the community, all talked about it, all spoke about concerns, all had a relative or loved one that either died of cancer, was sick with cancer, or another disease. And I was stunned to hear about the amount of children that are getting cancer in this small, remote setting. Now, the issue is linking this pollution with this higher rates of disease and cancer. And that's where these gaps are. There have been studies that, yes, this is happening, but there is no links that it correlates directly to industry. However, the people on the ground, that is what they believe, because before industry was there, they weren't sick.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a distressing part in watching is really feeling that the how it's really reached so many parts of the community, and we know there's so many pathways. So I'm curious, we've been chatting for a bit of time, and definitely don't want me to take too much more of your time, but there's a few more things I'd like to hear from you. First of all, is there another way to support, so of course people should watch your documentary, should share it wildly. Is there anything else to support? Did you want to speak about anything else kind of surrounding this what's next for you in that sense?
Yes, thank you so much. I mean, I would really encourage people to follow this story, to follow the communities there, specifically the Athabasca Chippewa First Nation is launching a lawsuit very shortly against industry, and I believe the Alberta Energy Regulator. So I encourage people to watch and follow these events as they unfold and not let them fade into the background. We have so many different injustices that are happening around the world, but also I believe that if something is happening in your own backyard, it's imperative to address that and to give voice to those people in your own backyard. Share the documentary. The documentary really focuses on these people and their experiences and their voices, which I believe is so important because we have industry and AR and experts, that they're hired by, coming in all the time and assuring the public that everything is a-okay. And something really, I just wanted to note that the ACFN chief, Alan Adam, who's in the documentary, he told me last week that the Alberta government is sending about 150 representatives to COP28, where you are right now. And in his words, to assure them that everything is a-okay here in Alberta. And he said, yet we here are sending 4 people over to tell them the truth of what really is going on and that it's not okay. And I just thought of and the resources to send 150, probably mixed of their oil and gas executives and their lobbyists and government representatives, and this small community is sending what they can to tell them the truth from the ground. And I just thought that was really telling of the situation, that they're up against these giants, but hoping, praying that the truth prevails in these situations. So hi.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. And actually, as you were mentioning, I am at COP. I have had the huge opportunity to meet the delegation of the ACFN delegation. And I think folks should stay tuned on these channels because we really hope there's going to be opportunities in the coming days to make sure that their voices are in fact heard at COP. So a little teaser for you folks to know that's happening. And yeah, so we'll share a few more resources. I'm thinking you folks get the exclusive right now. We knew that Alberta would come in strongly with this messaging of everything is okay, this idea that they've been promoting of ethical oil, and we wanted to show something else. So I'm going to give our audience here and you a sneak peek of a postcard that we are bringing to COP28. Wow. To be given to delegates, which in the back describes what happened with the Imperial leak. So folks are just getting a preview. Wow. I don't know if I was allowed to share it live, but I just did because you prompted me to do so, just as a way to say that yes, we are really, it is important for us to challenge it. And for those of us like me that are non-Indigenous, we have to remember that it is important, it is our duty to hold our governments accountable. They cannot be doing this on our behalf and with our consent. So with that in mind, this might be a good moment for folks to think of actions, things that you want to do. I hope people watching feel angered and also feel like they want to step into action. There is an opportunity to do so. So earlier in this live, I mentioned that Keepers of the Water is another organization that is active on this, Indigenous Climate Action as well. And so between the 3 of us, Indigenous Climate Action, Keepers of the Water, and Environmental Defense, we have written a letter to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Premier Danielle Smith explaining that we support as organizations, Indigenous environmental organizations, the demands of the nations. And so folks can go sign on that letter. They can add their names as individuals to that letter, and they can find that at cleanuptoxictailings.ca. So that might be something, a first step even though, of course, the very first step is watching killer water and making sure that you share it out. Perhaps as we wrap up, I'm wondering for you, what's next?
Yeah.
Perhaps on this story, perhaps on other stories that you were just talking about as you're already on assignment somewhere else.
Yes. So I am here in Secwepemc territory, and I got to get going because we are on the ground here where the TMX pipeline is being constructed through their unceded lands. And the Canadian government, which owns this pipeline, they went back on their word to the Secwepemc that they would not construct this pipeline through a certain territory, which was very sacred. It's called Pipsel. About a month ago, they reversed that decision, and now they're plowing through it. And so I'm here covering you know, some community members, land defenders here, that it's their 11th hour. This is what they have. This is the last of their Vatican, of their sacredness that is intrinsically connected. It's the site of their creation story that is being desecrated. So we are out on these front lines right now, working to bring their stories to the forefront. This is what is really happening while Canada and, you know, is over at COP28 saying that everything is okay and choosing reconciliation on, you know, on their account when it's not the case. So that's what I'm off to do right now. So hi, thank you so much for all of your work and for having me today.
I mean, we thank you for doing this work. We thank independent media for continuing to be on the front lines. It's so appreciated and impressive. And for us, for folks who are following, we will continue to follow very closely this story. First and foremost, but the fact that the Imperial Oil CEO will have to appear to Parliament within the coming work that Brandi's going to be doing and our work to keep following that story. But in the meantime, it is with a huge amount of gratitude that I want to say good day for you. I will be heading to bed soon. and also thank you for the folks in the comments that have been active. Really great.
Hi. Take care. Thank you. Hi.
Thank you so much. Take care.